It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
Appreciate you being with us. The phone number is always 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Follow me on X if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Very much appreciate you being with us. The guys, Gary and Eric, they return after the new year. So there's a lot going on, and I'm predicting, even though this is typically a very, I don't know, not necessarily newsworthy week, I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of news. So I'm appreciative of the opportunity to fill in here on Red Eye Radio. And again, it's 866-90-RED-EYE. Phone lines are open. Number of things going on. Number one, Donald Trump's epic speech in Phoenix at AmericaFest for Turning Point USA. This was a great speech. And so throughout the night tonight, I'll be playing you cuts from the speech. But this is part of what the president-elect had to say. It is going to be a very wild 4 years.
And for all of us standing before you today, I can proudly proclaim that the golden age of America is upon us. It is. It'll be a golden age.
I mean, you can hear the crowd just going crazy.
There's a spirit that we have now that we didn't have just a short while ago. Sadly, we didn't have. Well, who the hell can have spirit?
Well, listen, he is right when he talks about the spirit that is happening right now in America. You know, you, of course, have the Democrats, and they are flummoxed. He talked about how the Democrats, they're very upset over the election, whatever. I really don't care. And I think most of us are beyond caring what the Democrats think at this point. A couple of noteworthy headlines. There is a new continuing resolution. It was passed. No raising of the debt ceiling. That is something that Donald Trump did want. The Republicans, though, they didn't get that done. And I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't a real fan of the notion of raising the debt ceiling. That was what Donald Trump wanted. And basically the bottom line is that the president-elect didn't want to have to deal with that mess heading into his second term in office. And so that's part of the conversation that we'll have tonight. There's, again, a lot going on. And then the president-elect, he did have a lot of things to say about what is going on in America today. And he talked about one of the first things that he wants to do when he takes that oath of office.
With the stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school. And we will keep men out of women's sports. And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one?
Day one.
Under the Trump administration, it will be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
I mean, you can tell, obviously, the crowd is going crazy. This was Turning Point USA, and they do this. It's AmericaFest. It's several days. And so you had basically a who's who of the conservative movement. And I thought that Donald Trump, he did have a really good speech. And part of what he talked about, part of what he spoke about is the Panama Canal. Now, this is a very big story today, and it's not the first time that we've heard about the president-elect wanting to exert control over the Panama Canal, and it's all about taking back, he says, the Panama Canal. But really what's going on is that there's a number of issues related to the Panama Canal. Number one is they are charging us a lot of money. The price has gone up to go through the canal, and I will explain that. The other point, though, is it's all about China and how China is exerting more and more control over the Panama Canal. Now, this isn't real surprising because China has had their sights set on the Panama Canal for a long time. And so this is what President-elect Donald Trump had to say this weekend regarding the Panama Canal.
It's such a terrible thing is happening. The Panama Canal is considered a vital national asset for the United States of America.
Yeah.
Due to its critical role, American economy, the whole world economy, and also national security. The Panama Canal. Has anyone ever heard of the Panama Canal?
Yeah.
Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else.
So this has long raised the ire of Republicans. Now, maybe you know the story, maybe you don't, but way back in 1977, Jimmy Carter gave the Panama Canal basically to Panama, even though we designed it, we built it, we paid for it, Americans died building it, and Jimmy Carter just gave it away.
So we built it. We're the ones that use it. They gave it away. The Panama Canal opened for business 110 years ago and was built at huge cost to the United States. And it really is big when you consider the lives and the treasure, the equivalent of $1.2 trillion today. You don't hear those numbers.
Yeah, you know, it was built to connect the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Oceans, and we have a massive amount of boats and ships, of course, that sail through it. And it's critical for our trade routes. It's critical for our supply chain. 70% of the ships that sail through the Panama Canal, they're either leaving or going to U.S. ports. And so Trump was talking about, and part of his speech on all this, is that 38,000 Americans, he says, American men died because of either accidents or disease, mosquitoes, malaria, that kind of a thing. And so there was a severe drought in the last many years that impacted the prices of ships going through the Panama Canal. I guess what happens is the less water, the higher the prices. But I've read the water levels are back to normal, but the prices remain higher to go through. And so this is an issue, of course, for President-elect Trump. He doesn't like to see America ripped off. And so that's part of it, is that he wants to see those prices lowered. But see, that's only part of it. One other big issue is who is actually managing the Panama Canal.
It was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? China.
Yeah, President Trump not exactly thrilled that China has been exerting more and more influence over the Panama Canal. Now, they've been investing in the canal, specifically its operations. So we spent all of that money building it way back when, but now China comes along, and they've been working some construction projects in the last several years. I'm just going to bullet point it here, but China does control ports on either end of the Panama Canal. That's an issue because that does exert influence over the canal. China's construction companies have massive deals with the canal as well. There are worries that China could also monitor our naval and commercial ships as well. And so a big part of the Panama Canal is this concept of neutrality. And so you're going to hear a lot about this as this conversation continues over the next 4 years, because the canal is supposed to be neutral. All countries are supposed to be able to access it. But with all of the Chinese involvement, Donald Trump, and by the way, it's not just Donald Trump, many others as well who monitor such things, they do worry about the Panama Canal's neutrality, because China has invested so heavily, not only in the ports, but also as it continues to expand. And so Donald Trump said this to Tucker Carlson during the campaign about China's involvement in the Panama Canal.
China now controls it. They actually control the Panama Canal. They run it, they control it, and we shouldn't let that happen. And we can't let China be in Cuba, and they'll get out. If I'm president, they'll get out. Because I had a very good relationship with President Xi, but he respected this country, he respected me, and he'll get out. And we can't let them run the Panama Canal.
Well, so Panama will say no, that they have relationships with China, just like they have relationships with America, but China has helped to expand the canal. And so Trump has made headlines, and of course this was, again, over the weekend at America Fest, where he says that he wants the canal back.
You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it. So to the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly.
Yeah, so Panama's president, Jose Raul Molino, posted a video on social media last night, Sunday night, rejecting Donald Trump's demands. He says, and I'm again bullet pointing all of this, the sovereignty and independence of our country is not negotiable, Molino said. He says our canal has the mission to serve humanity and its commerce. Molino added, that is one of the greatest values that the Panamanians offer to the world. And so there's a lot of intrigue going on here. Donald Trump quoted Molino's response on Truth Social and said, "We'll see about that." So there's a number of things that are going on here. Donald Trump, part of this, of course, if you know how Donald Trump works, and I've been watching him for a long time, you have too, is the president-elect, former president, of course, obviously as well. You know that everything is a negotiation. So part of what's going on is that he is setting the stage, he's setting the table to try to get our fees to, sail through the Panama Canal lowered. Because, again, remember, they say there was a severe drought, and so the price went up because the water level was down. The water level supposedly is back up at the canal, but the prices have remained the same. So that's a problem. So Trump is saying, number one, we need to renegotiate these prices because he says we, as in America, we're getting ripped off. But again, the other part, and I think probably for Donald Trump, the bigger issue is China. And if you read, and I spent a lot of time doing it this evening, China has a lot of involvement with the Panama Canal. So yes, we bought the canal. I should say we built the canal. We paid for a lot of it. 38,000, as Donald Trump says, 38,000 of our American men died of malaria. There was accidents in well, but I mean, this was a very big deal. This is a huge, huge canal. But over the years, China, through their Belt and Road Initiative, they have been helping to, with their construction crews, they've been helping to expand it and upgrade it. And they're buying ports as well. So they're very involved in the canal. And so when Donald Trump says, and he said this to Tucker Carlson, I played you the audio just a second ago, where he says that if he is president, that Xi Jinping and China will exit the canal. And now that Trump is the president-elect, you know how they say crap's getting real? That's what's going on here. Now, I'm going to replay you this audio one more time.
China now controls it. They actually control the Panama Canal. They run.
Now, I will tell you that, the folks in Panama, the government of Panama and the independent entity that runs it, they will tell you, no, China does not run the Panama Canal. However, they have a lot of, in my opinion, they more than likely have a lot of influence because of all of the work that they've done on the Panama Canal.
They run it, they control it, and we shouldn't let that happen. And we can't let China be in Cuba, and they'll get out. If I'm president, they'll get out. Because I had a very good relationship with President Xi, but he respected this country, he respected me, and he'll get out. And we can't let them run the Panama Canal.
So I'm just going to tell you that I am a big supporter of Donald Trump. I don't know if Xi Jinping is just going to pack up those ports and go away and go home. I don't think that's the way that this is going to go down. So I don't know what's going to happen with the Panama Canal. But again, this has long been in the sights of Donald Trump. And right now, it takes center stage because of China's involvement, the fact that the president-elect does not feel like there is neutrality right now because, according to President Trump, China has the upper hand. And so we'll have to see where this whole thing goes. Ultimately, I think that Trump wants to see those prices lowered for our ships. And the situation with China, that is going to be an ongoing conversation and an ongoing battle. Got a lot more straight ahead. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mattis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Electrical systems are one of the most common causes of winter breakdowns. So when your batteries talk, it's important you listen. Know the warning signs that could indicate your electrical system needs attention to help avoid getting stuck out in the cold this winter. Keep an eye out for lights that are dim, as this is an early warning sign that your alternator is degrading and near the end of its life cycle. Lights that are brighter than normal, on the other hand, can indicate your alternator is overcharging. You should immediately get a full electrical system check if you notice either of these warning signs.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. And one of my favorite audio bites from the president-elect's speech at the America Fest for Turning Point USA.
And woke has to stop, because along with everything else, it's destroying our country. We're going to stop woke. Woke is bull.
There you go. Yeah, you know what? There was a lot of cursing at America Fest, and President Trump certainly is no stranger to the dirty words, the cursing. But here's the thing, is that when you look at where America is right now, there's a lot of reasons to curse. Did you hear what happened? I'm going to be able to get into this coming up after the next break, in the next segment. There is a horrible story out of New York where just days after New York Governor Kathy Hochul, she proudly posts this video where she is taking the subway, and she sounds ridiculous.
I'm on the subway train heading out to Queens Center. I have a lot of, not quite last minute, but I have holiday shopping to do. I've got an adorable 2-year-old granddaughter, so it's a lot more fun to shop. I can take the subway wherever we need to go. And I want all New Yorkers to feel safe, which is why we've added so many more National Guard, over 250 more people that'll make sure that your ride is as safe as it can be.
Because everybody knows what's been going on the subway, right, in New York. Well, she posts this video where she's proudly declaring the New York subways are safe. Wait till you hear what happened earlier today.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for the guys. Always appreciate the opportunity. Throw the host a bone, would you? Follow me on X and Facebook, by the way, at Dan Mandis Show. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. So, crazy story out of New York. First of all, New York Governor, if you're just joining us, New York Governor Kathy Hochul valiantly and seemingly very excited that she was able to make the New York subways safer. She actually put out a video.
I'm on the subway train heading out to Queens Center. I have a lot of, not quite last minute, but I have holiday shopping to do. I've got an adorable 2-year-old granddaughter, so it's a lot more fun to shop. I can take the subway wherever we need to go. And I want all New Yorkers to feel safe, which is why we've added so many more National Guard, over 250 more people that'll make sure that your ride is as safe as it can be.
Well, if you don't know, the subways in New York have been a complete and utter disaster and train wreck. You've got druggies down there, you've got gangbangers down there, and you've got a whole lot of homeless people and migrants. And so days after she valiantly puts out that video, and here's the funny thing. If you see the video, and I posted it to my X feed at Dan Mandis Show, she's on the subway, and she's talking to folks, and everything looks oh so nice and clean, right? And you people listening in New York, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I used to live in New York, and I know the condition of those subways. Obviously, when she did the video, she is surrounded by security. She is surrounded by local cops. Do you know who wasn't surrounded by security and local cops? A woman who was burned to death by a migrant from Guatemala, which is in the news this morning. And so right after she puts out that video, this horrific thing happens at the hands of a migrant. A migrant from Guatemala was arrested in connection to the heinous death of a woman who was literally lit on fire and burned to death on a subway train in Brooklyn, New York on Sunday. Sources identified the person of interest to Fox News Digital as 33-year-old Sebastian Zapata. While police did not identify the person of interest, a high-level New York Police Department source telling Fox News Digital the individual entered the U.S. illegally from Guatemala in 2018 when President-elect Donald Trump was president during his first term. The person of interest has no prior arrests in New York City and one prior arrest in Arizona, the source said, though details about the arrest were not available. You know, here's the problem. The problem is that people like Kathy Hochul and, Democrats there in the state of New York, they love to be sanctuary cities. And so as their status as a sanctuary city, these kinds of things happen. And so whether the person came in during the Trump administration or came in during the Biden administration, the reality is that when you have all of these cities and all of these states that are sanctuary states and cities, then these kinds of things are encouraged. Fox News Digital has reached out to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement for more information on Zapata. New York Police Department officials said no charges had been filed in the case during a Sunday evening press conference. Perhaps they will be forthcoming. They say as the train pulled into the station, the suspect calmly walked up to the victim, explaining that the female victim was in a seated position. The suspect used what they say believed to be lighter fluid or something to ignite the victim's clothing, which became fully engulfed in a matter of seconds. So I don't know exactly how. Maybe the woman was sleeping. I really don't know. Officers were on patrol at the station when they smelled and saw smoke, prompting them to investigate the situation. When they arrived, the officers saw a person standing inside the train car, fully engulfed in flames. The flames were ultimately put out with the help of an MTA employee and a fire extinguisher. The victim was pronounced dead. They say the person of interest stayed on the scene and was seated on a bench on the platform just outside the train car. I mean, it's just, it's insane, the things that are happening. And so now the question is, okay, so were there any indications that this person was going to do this kind of thing? I mean, it sounds like clearly this guy is not only is he a migrant, but he's also mentally ill. Now, they say migrant. I don't know if he is, let's see. Yeah, he entered the U.S. illegally. So he's an illegal alien, not a migrant. First of all, Fox Digital, just truth in reporting. That's part of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to say, well, these folks are not illegal aliens, they're migrants. Well, no, they're illegal aliens is what they are. And so as all of this is going on, there is this interview with Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, y'all know he really is the face of illegal immigration. He was on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan over the weekend, and he spent a lot of time tap dancing. I'm going to play you some of this audio because, and I'm going to give you a trigger warning. It's excruciatingly painful to listen to, and it's also going to make you angry because Mayorkas, number one, is he's not really answering the questions, but number two, Margaret Brenneman, she doesn't really answer, she doesn't really ask what I would say are the more relevant questions. But this is part of that dialogue.
The incoming border czar, Tom Homan, says these children are being exploited and trafficked. Is that true?
Well, Margaret, we certainly have received reports of children being trafficked, even those as to whom we know where they are. That is outside the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. What we do is we turn children over within 72 hours, as the law requires, to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then HHS places those children. Of course, we investigate cases of trafficking. But there are children who are reunited with a parent here in the United States or a legal guardian.
See, that's the problem. And he just goes on and on. And Margaret Brennan, she doesn't stop him. But when he says we send these kids to parents or legal guardians, here's the problem. Oftentimes those, and I'm going to air quote this, these legal guardians, they're not necessarily vetted. And oftentimes that's how these poor kids end up being trafficked. Because our government literally is sending them to the traffickers. And there's so many examples of that. And Brennan is trying to get to the bottom of it. And oftentimes, Alejandro Mayorkas has nothing to say except the same bloviating that we've heard for 4 years.
And they move, and sometimes the government loses track. Individuals do not comply with their reporting obligations or otherwise. I think it is inaccurate to say that all of them are trafficked or victimized. There are a number of reasons why we might lose track of an individual. That is not necessarily specific to this administration. That has been a long-standing challenge in the immigration system. One example of why that system is so broken, why the duration of time in proceedings is unacceptably long and has to be remedied. Remember,
the dumb thing is you had the White House and you had control of the House and the Senate in the first 2 years.
We're dealing with a system that was last reformed in 1996.
So the more that he speaks, the more frustrating it gets. And I would agree that the system has been broken for a long time. But remember that all of these issues, the trafficking of kids, was a lot less when Donald Trump was president because the border was closed. The more chaos, the more trafficking, and the more drugs. So when you invite chaos like they did, the more chaos you're going to get. And so she asked him, Margaret Brennan, she asked him about, the sheer numbers that we're talking about. And these numbers remain horrific.
So at this point last year, in December of last year, border crossings were at record highs. Now they've dropped to the lowest level of the Biden administration. How much of that drop off is because Mexico is now stopping migrants from even getting to that southern border of the United States?
That is critically one element of it. It is not the only element of it. The president took decisive action after politics killed what would have been an extraordinarily enduring solution to what is a broken immigration system. That bipartisan legislation that I was very proud to be a part of would have really delivered a solution. Because politics killed it, the president took executive action. In June of this year, we began to execute very successfully and very rapidly that executive action, and that has been a key driver of the low number of encounters.
So a few things. When they say the lowest numbers of encounters, all right, that's fine if that's what he wants to say, except that it also means that they're just sneaking in through points of entry that are not protected. They're not going through the traditional routes. They're sneaking over the border. That's number one. So we really don't know how many people are coming across our southern border. It's like we don't know what we don't know. That's number one. Number two, Biden is also apparently finally deporting people. That's great. A lot of this is, finally, but it took him a long time. And that's the problem. He talks about how politics killed the legislation, right? The problem is, and we've talked about this, well-worn territory, my friends, but the problem is that bill would not have stopped the flow. It would have allowed thousands into our country illegally, among many other issues. Politics didn't kill the bill. The bill was too weak on border security. And Democrats voted against it as well because some said it was too tough on illegal immigration. And he's also trying to, Mayorkas is, he's also trying to make it look like Joe Biden's really tough on illegal immigration these days with the executive action. Well, here's why that actually makes him look really bad or weak. Because Biden could have done that executive action any time during his presidency, but he didn't. And so the reason why he wanted to get that executive order going was because he knew, Joe Biden knew, that he was losing the election on illegal immigration. I mean, clearly, that's what happened.
We are now delivering to the incoming administration a southern border at which the number of individuals encountered is well below the level experienced in 2019, the last year before the pandemic.
But the immigration surge into the U.S. since 2021 has been the largest in American history. That is incredible.
Oh, and
so,
it is, Margaret, it is one element of the greatest displacement of people in the world since World War II. This is a phenomenon that has not been unique to the southern border of the United States.
Right, and that's a familiar talking point. The open border helped fuel that migration. We had people from all across the world coming to Mexico and coming across because they knew that they couldn't get in. They knew that they could get in. So that's hardly a defense, but that's what he always likes to say. And by the way, even if that was true, that worldwide migration was going on, it does not excuse the fact that he and Biden left the border wide open. But one of the things that Margaret Brennan did not ask is something that I will, and that is coming up next. Dan Mattis here for Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. We'll return next right here on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
Red Eye Radio, 86690 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandison for Gary and Eric. They will return after the new year. And I spent good amount of my time this evening sitting through this interview between Margaret Brennan and Alejandro Mayorkas. And she did ask him, some fair questions, and he, of course, did not answer, or his answers were infuriating. But here's the thing that she did not ask. Never once did Margaret Brennan say, but you told the American people for 3 years that the border was closed when clearly everybody saw that it was open. Why'd you lie?
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-907-3339, 866-90 Red Eye. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. Follow me on Twitter or X, if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. You can also find me on Facebook at Dan Mandis Show. The scandal that rocked America, but not apparently the Washington press corps, the bombshell report on Joe Biden's health decline during the entirety of his 4 years in the White House. I don't know if you saw the White House press briefing on Friday, but I was stunned that no one asked about this Wall Street Journal report. And, of course, I call her Cringe. Cringe Jean-Pierre had nothing to say about it. But I got to tell you that more and more stories are coming out about the soon-to-be former vice president, or I should say former president. Now, we've had a couple of days to digest the story of Joe Biden and the massive cover-up of his declining health issues per the Wall Street Journal. Now, just to recap a few bullet points, realize they spoke to not one, not two, but 50 people from inside the Biden White House, and nobody decided to ask a question. I'm going to tell you why. The White House press briefing is full of reporters covering, yes, you guessed it, the White House. Well, the fact that the Wall Street Journal came out with this article, this investigative piece about how the circle around Joe Biden was so incredibly tight because they knew that he was diminished cognitively. And that's why he rarely held cabinet meetings. They said that the president had good days and bad days. And all of this was covered up since day one. And so the government was literally being run by this shadowy group of people surrounding Joe Biden. And nobody in the White House press corps seemed to care enough to ask Cringe Jean-Pierre about this story, which is so stunning to me. Not really. The most incredible part of this whole story is the fact that it is possible that those 13 members of our military could still be alive today if the protective circle, the protective cocoon around Joe Biden hadn't have been so tight. You probably know the story. There was this Congressman Adam Smith, chair of at the time, the House Armed Services Committee, who had concerns about the plan to pull out of Afghanistan. And he was desperately trying to get a hold of Joe Biden, but he couldn't penetrate that protective wall around the president. And ultimately, as you know the story, they tried to pull out. It ended with 13 members of our military dead. And so the biggest question that people should be asking themselves this morning is, could those 13 still be alive today if Adam Smith had been allowed to get in touch with Joe Biden. As a matter of fact, one of the points that a lot of people are making, in the Wall Street Journal reported this, is that this president, Joe Biden, was so incredibly cocooned, was so incredibly disconnected from the day-to-day that he rarely spoke to members of Congress, rarely. And if you dared complain, then you would get attacked by the Democrat apparatus. Remember the Hur report, where they wouldn't release the tapes, and it's obvious why. You know, remember, they said that Joe Biden would come across, he wasn't going to recommend any charges because he would appear to a jury to be just a well-meaning, forgetful, elderly man or whatever it was. And it's obvious that if those tapes were actually released, it would portray Joe Biden as what he is. An elderly man, in my opinion, not well-meaning, battling dementia or whatever cognitive decline he is dealing with. And so Biden's cabinet, they were put into roles that the president typically would handle, but Joe Biden couldn't. And so there is this core group of insiders who are basically running the country. And so this massive report comes out, and Friday's White House press briefing, 0 questions. How is that possible? No questions. I'm going to tell you why. Because the media did not dig hard enough at the time. We all knew that it was going on. The media, they just played along. That's what they did. The media basically played along like nothing was going on. Peter Doocy was on Fox News over the weekend. On Saturday, he reflected on all this.
Listening to Joe Biden's voice has been my life's work for the last 6 years. And what I think about when I watch this, and especially the stuff about Afghanistan, the day of the Abbey Gate bombing, I was in a press conference that was still kind of socially distanced. And I asked him a question, something to the effect of, do you bear responsibility for this? And he turned it around on me at the time, asking questions about some deal that Trump and Mike Pompeo had negotiated. In the moment, it was all about Trump. And it was an entire campaign and an entire administration that they made about things they thought Donald Trump had done wrong. And look where that got him.
Right. I mean, he's got a great point on so many different levels. They spent so much time agitating or blaming Donald Trump about everything. And how Donald Trump, this is the most ironic part of this whole thing, is that they were constantly talking about how Donald Trump was a threat to democracy, while they are hiding and protecting a president with massively slipping cognitive abilities. The man literally behind the Resolute desk, there were times when he couldn't even communicate. He couldn't remember the lines that were being given to him so that he could respond to Robert Hur during that whole line of questioning. And so, as Peter Doocy says, look where it got Joe Biden. Look where it got the Democrats. Now, my question is this. I want an investigation. I want to know who knew what when. You think Barack Obama didn't know? Of course he did. You think Chuck Schumer didn't know? Of course he did. You think Nancy Pelosi didn't know? Of course she did. They all did. And the media just sat there over the course of the last 4 years, and all they did was castigate those people who had questions. And so you think about all of these members of the media that were so, what's the right word? They were so antagonistic as all of this was going on. And as the American people were looking at this president, President Joe Biden, clearly losing his cognitive ability. And then you had the likes of Joe Scarborough, for example, gaslighting the American people.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth.
Right.
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
I mean, come on. And I remember when that happened, I thought, you've got to be kidding. There's no way that Joe Scarborough is not seeing what the rest of us are seeing. But obviously, they were covering for Dementia Joe. And that's just one of many examples of the media defending Biden's clear, rapid decline. And so now, as the Wall Street Journal reported Thursday, I think it was Thursday, that all of this has been going on literally since day one of his presidency.
She knows so long as she was 9.
I mean, we all have heard the sound bites over and over again. And when the media talked about how great Joe Biden was and how he was looking for, a dead congressman.
Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
And nobody thought that was bizarre. Nobody thought it was strange that Joe Biden.
Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
Was looking for a congressman that had been killed months earlier. We all saw him wandering around, clearly not fully aware of where he was. He's on a little tiny stage. And he couldn't figure out how to get off the stage. There is a horrible story out, just a horrifying story from this weekend. This is the headline. I'll just give you the headline. Senile Biden's insult to the families of Marines murdered in disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. You know what he did? This is horrible. Joe Biden made these families wait 3 hours while he napped on Air Force One on the tarmac before a dignified transfer. Multiple military families have now told the Daily Mail. Can you imagine that? Your son, your daughter, your wife, your husband has been killed with this disastrous pullout of Afghanistan. You go the dignified transfer of power and you're waiting. You're waiting for the president to finish his 3-hour nap on Air Force One as you're standing there grieving. That's what Joe Biden did. The shocking allegation comes amid growing calls for the Biden administration to be investigated over its scandalous cover-up of the president's ailing health. Biden, it has emerged, has not been present for key moments of his presidency, nor has he been involved in major decisions like the disastrous withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan in August of 2021. And Joe Biden made them wait for 3 hours. But don't listen to those families.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth.
No, listen to Joe Scarborough.
And F you if you can't handle the truth.
Is that what you're going to say to the families, Joe Scarborough, that were made to wait on the tarmac for 3 hours while our dementia-ridden president took a nap?
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
And, we all said something is wrong. He doesn't know where he is. He's making mistakes. He can't figure out how to walk off of a small stage. And the media, they just kept pushing back and pushing back.
I was sitting, 2 feet from him across the table, and he was, intense.
Have trouble walking sometimes? Yeah, so did FDR. He wanted GD war.
But he's totally focused. He's very sharp.
They say he's sharp in meetings and so on.
Very lucid, very well informed. Biden is stately, and he comes with gravitas.
And so the White House, and that's all the media right there. All these media members that I'm playing for you right now, even right now, they have no questions. They have no idea. They have no curiosity about what happened to Joe Biden, about what is going on with Joe Biden. Because remember, he's still the president. Biden's team actually hired a vocal coach, put other officials into roles usually occupied by the president, scrapped his meetings on bad days, and kept them at arm's length from his own cabinet members. And so the question is, which member of the media looks worse? You know, I just played you Joe Scarborough, but then, of course, there was Nicole Wallace, also on MSNBC, where she said that if you are seeing the videos of Joe Biden, you're seeing all this? Well, this is nothing. They're just a bunch of deep fake videos by Republicans.
There's a growing and insidious trend in right-wing media, broadcast, print, and social media. It is to take highly misleading and selectively edited videos of President Biden directly from Republican National Committee social media accounts and then use those videos to spread messages virally to cast doubt on President Biden's fitness for office.
I mean, she used a couple of examples. One was when Biden wandered over to give a thumbs up to that skydiver. Remember that one? And everybody said he was just wandering off. But see, here's the thing. That was so ridiculous because there simply was no debating what we saw over the last 4 years. And so when I play this audio of Nicole Wallace saying, oh, well, these are just deep fake videos. No, they really weren't.
Cheap fakes, videos of real events that are intentionally manipulated to fool viewers, released on an RNC opposition research social media account with zero independent fact-checking by these so-called journalists and spread throughout the right-wing ecosystem.
You know what's funny is Nicole Wallace saying, talking about these, and I'm going to air quote, so-called journalists. That is actually Nicole Wallace and Joe Scarborough and everybody at MSNBC to a T.
And we would take the hand-wringing by right-wing media about Biden's mental fitness in videos intentionally manipulated to make him look unfit, maybe a little more seriously if they weren't radio silent about the repeated, glaring, and real mental lapses happening behind podiums and on camera on the part of Donald Trump.
I mean, come on. And so all of these look so, let's just say they didn't age well, right? They didn't age well. And so now there's a great debate going on online. Which news person or news personality looks worse? Is it Nicole Wallace? Is it Joe Scarborough? Is it Mika? Which one looks the worst? 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Oh, still to come, Kamala Harris lies to the American people. Details ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Uncompensated detention at docks frustrates drivers of all stripes. If you're an owner-operator, you have at least some control over the matter. Make the subject a standard part of your rate and/or contract negotiations on the front end. You can use your own numbers to calculate an hourly rate to compensate for lost income opportunity, as well as fixed costs, which don't stop when the truck stops. Those two elements of a fair detention rate were deemed appropriate by most of Overdrive's audience almost a decade ago. We've used income, fixed costs, and miles average of our owner-operator business services from ATBS's clients to compute an average $64 an hour detention rate then. And 10 years later, the figure is $83 an hour. Use your own numbers to calculate your rate. A simple conversation with any broker or shipper or your carrier if you're leased about what you're putting in the rate might yield results you don't expect. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. Who knew what when? As far as Joe Biden and his dementia over the 4 years, as the Wall Street Journal reported, that it was well known within the Biden administration that Joe Biden was not all there. And you cannot tell me that Kamala Harris didn't know.
I'm not lying. If there was,
I'm telling you a fact.
But if there ever is a problem,
yeah.
Do you think that you could go tell the American public? Do you think in your role that you're in a position to do that?
Of course, if necessary, but there's no need for that.
I mean, when this whole thing was going on, she's running for president at the time, and as this whole thing is going on, she's talking about this. And you remember, because we all watched this over the 4 years, and he got worse and worse and worse. And so she's like saying, well, there's no problem. And you know how she gets that nasally sanctimonious sound to her? Well, there's no problem. I want an investigation. And Republicans really need to look at who knew what and when, especially Kamala Harris.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. Indeed, for Gary and Eric, they will return after the first of the year. You know, I'm just sort of talking about and giving you a bit of an update on what you would have thought would have been a major blockbuster story regarding Joe Biden. Wall Street Journal, of course, Wall Street Journal reporting that there has been a massive cover-up within the Biden administration as they have covered up his ongoing cognitive issues. And so part of what I'm asking for, and a lot of people are asking for, is an investigation. And there's clearly a lot of reasons why. But I want to know who knew what when. I mean, that's one of the things that I really want to know. And I think the American people should demand an investigation. And with the Republicans having the House of Representatives in the coming administration, we also have the Senate. And yes, we do have the White House as well. We need to look into comments like this from Kamala Harris as she continued to say, oh, no, everything's fine.
There is a political argument that is being made that is not based on substance. And you're asking me to hypothesize around what are my duties to the American people as Vice President of the United States that are based on ethics and morals and the law. I will always follow those rules.
Well, it didn't seem like she did. As a matter of fact, it's not that she didn't seem like, she clearly didn't. And she clearly, in that moment, she was lying to the American people. She was lying to you and she was lying to me. As has now been well documented. And so I don't really know what charges could come of this. My local show in Nashville, Tennessee, somebody said conspiracy to defraud the American people. Okay. Whatever. But who do you charge? Patricia is in Washington, D.C., assuming listening on our affiliate there, WMAL. Patricia, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead.
Well, I think as much as anyone, Jill Biden should be publicly shamed. She knew from the beginning. She knows now. When she would have let him run again after that disastrous debate. And she's gaslighted us since 2019, and she needs to be publicly shamed. And I agree with you that the military around him, Milley, they also need to be held to account. But also Jill Biden, she knew. And
well, clearly,
I heard
yeah. Hey, Patricia, let me ask you this question. You live in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you work for the federal government or not, but here's my question to you is, do you think that the American people, if this eventually does get some sort of actual coverage, do you think the American people will ever forget being lied to for the last 4 years?
Well, the honest people won't. In fact, they're pretty mad now, like me. Because there are some people who they would have voted for him knowing, because they know he's not really running the country, and so they agree with what issues and policies was happening. So they would have voted for him. But the honest people won't forget.
No way. And Patricia, I very much appreciate the call. And here's the thing. Is that the Democrats, even right up until the end, they continue to lie.
Ageism is an issue. Americans have a rich history of holding people's physical characteristics against them. Okay, you can ask African Americans.
He's older. That doesn't mean that he is unfit, and there's a lot of ageism there.
Now, this age attack, this obsession by the right, Joe Biden may not be able to speak for himself the way that he used to.
Right. So, I mean, just little examples of what we've all been seeing over the last 4 years. And so there's a lot of people commenting on this. I'm certainly not the only one. I'm sure Gary and Eric, they talked about this as well. Scott Jennings, one of the lone voices of reason on CNN, angered a lot of people. But that's
It's the biggest scandal in America. And the level and volume of people who dedicated themselves to lying to everyone at home about this man's condition for 4 straight years up through this summer is breathtaking. It's a scandal of epic proportions, and it's a fair question to ask. Who is running the country?
Right.
Who has been running the country? And as I said earlier, if you're worried about Donald Trump's advisors having influence, for the last 4 years, apparently this president, duly elected, but this president was not capable of fulfilling the duties of the office. And his staff and the White House lied about it and kept it from the American people. It's an absolute scandal.
Yeah, it is a scandal. And can you imagine? And I realize, and this is something that Peter Doocy said, can you imagine if this was Donald Trump? And so I don't know who you charge, but to Patricia's point, Jill Biden clearly knew, and Jill Biden was absolutely complicit in that cover-up. White House doctor who was saying, oh, yeah, Joe Biden, he's absolutely fine. Clearly he wasn't. Tom Cotton was talking to the Sean Hannity show, and I want to say that one of the things, and Tom Cotton is one of my favorites, but one of the things that he said is, nobody's been fooled by all of this secrecy by the Biden administration.
There was a vow of silence among Democrats and liberals in the media for 4 years. It was just in February of this year that Chuck Schumer was saying Joe Biden's mental acuity is great.
Yep.
It hasn't diminished at all over the years. So think about that. In February, 4 months before Joe Biden's calamitous debate performance, Chuck Schumer was lying to the American people, saying he hasn't lost a step in years. They didn't say it after the debate either, when it was clear to everyone. It was only after the election, when it could no longer affect their ability to cling to power, that you start to get some of the real story the American people could see from the beginning.
Right, and part of the news cycle this morning. Big headline from the Daily Mail: as Joe Biden napped on Air Force One, he made all of those family members wait for the dignified transfer of power. And that is horrifying. That is disrespectful, and it is shocking to me that more of the media is not covering this. Remember that the Wall Street Journal, they had reported this before, and it was months ago. And the Wall Street Journal was just absolutely obliterated. I mean, they were attacked left and right. But they stood by the story. And the media, of course, continued to cover the whole thing up. And you know, it's interesting, because I think if there's one thing that this administration will be forever tied to and forever accused of, is lying perpetually to the American people. I mean, there was, of course, Joe Biden's ultimate fitness for office. Okay, so that's one that is going to be consistent. The other one is the border is closed and the border is secure. Clearly, we knew that that was a lie. Remember when the Biden administration accused the Border Patrol of whipping Haitians? That was also a lie. Remember when the Biden administration and the media, both of them said, there's not a rise in violent crime. Look at the numbers. Look at the FBI statistics. Violent crime is down. David Muir, even during the debate, fact-checked Donald Trump and said, no, Mr. President, actually, the FBI crime statistics show that the numbers are down. And David Muir, of all people, you know that he knew that the Biden administration, as I've said many times, the Biden administration has said, they made it so convoluted in the reporting of the crime statistics that a lot of these cities, the Democrat-run cities, by the way, where they have the most crime, the reporting of those crime stats became so convoluted that it became impossible, and cities just gave up. They literally gave up on reporting those statistics so that it looked like the numbers were down, but the reality was that they were up. They just were not being reported. And so everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, Joe Biden was lying, either about his past or about policy. Personal, policy, politics. Joe Biden, it was one lie after another. And so Tom Cotton was asked the question, should there be an investigation?
Well, it probably wouldn't hurt because there's still a lot of questions to be answered. And I think you're going to start seeing more of those questions answered. That Wall Street Journal article had 50 anonymous sources. I mean, you had to line up outside the door and draw a number if you wanted to share your story about Joe Biden's diminished capacity once he's finally out of office.
Oh, you wait. I mean, can you imagine? I make it a point not to necessarily buy a lot of books about politics, but can you imagine, friends, what those books and maybe even movies are going to be like and how they're going to depict Joe Biden and the insiders that were actually running the unelected advisors, the deep state that has actually been running our country for the last 4 years, again, unelected? Byron Donalds, of course, as you can imagine, Byron Donalds does agree.
Here's what we know. One of the greatest presidential hoax played on the American people is still playing out today. In 2020, his staff knew he was compromised, confused. He was not in command. So to talk about where he is today as if it's real, it is embarrassing, it is irresponsible, and it is a bold-faced lie.
There you go, bold-faced lie. Byron Donalds is absolutely right. There's this guy named, and this is getting into like a little weedy, but there's this dude named Chris Cillizza, and he is some people call him a journalist, other people call him a hack, whatever. I will give Chris Cillizza actual credit, and he's a buffoon. But he actually admitted what most people won't, and that is that he lacked the journalistic curiosity to ask the correct questions about Joe Biden's clear, rapidly diminishing faculties.
As a reporter, I have a confession to make. I should have pushed harder earlier for more information about Joe Biden's mental and physical well-being and any signs of decline. So let me explain. Joe Biden was president from 2020 to 2024. I worked at CNN through 2022. During that time, the early part when I was at CNN, 2020 to 2022, Republicans would regularly ping me and say, why don't you ask more questions of Joe Biden and how he's doing? He's 76, 77, 78-year-old man. And I would sort of brush them off because what I would say is, well, there's no obvious evidence that he's declining. Yeah, he moves a little slower, he talks a little slower, but there's no evidence that he's declining. And the White House and the people around Joe Biden were absolutely adamant that suggesting anything, asking the question about whether he was in some physical, mental, or both decline was offensive.
I mean, that is crazy. What kind of a journalist backs down when he gets pushback from the White House? Good Lord. And so the more you hear about the White House and how they were adamant that Joe Biden was fine, it should have prompted a lot more questions. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. Playing some of this audio from Chris Cillizza. And he is a former Washington Post reporter. And he's talking about how it really did impact him that the White House was pushing back on him, asking questions about Joe Biden's mental decline.
And I think that impacted me at some level because while I did ask the question from time to time of, not directly the White House, but aides and people around in that orbit, I didn't really push on it, if I'm being honest. Now, once I left CNN and once it became a little bit more clear to me about Biden's age, I think I did write pretty regularly and talk pretty regularly about how I wasn't sure that this guy was up to it. And then obviously after the June 27th debate, everybody, including me, was writing and talking about it.
Well, and here's the problem. The problem that people like Chris Cillizza and many others have in the mainstream media is that you spend so much time defending Joe Biden and not being truthful that once you finally come around to telling the truth, it is far too little, too late. Nice try, though.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Appreciate you being here. Throw me a bone, would you? And follow me on X and Facebook at Dan Mandis Show. A lot of these stories that I talk about, I do post to my X feed. And I know that you more than likely were not surprised by the fact that the government technically did not shut down. They passed that continuing resolution. By the way, I know that you're not surprised. They passed that continuing resolution just by the skin of their teeth. And there's a lot of people that are angry. Now, there's a lot to this passage of the continuing resolution wasn't like the passages of the past. I mean, we see this all the time. It's like every few months, there's all of this angst and anxiety about shutting down the government. Oh, no, they can't shut down. Who cares? Shut it down. One of my favorite moments from the first Donald Trump presidency was when he was sitting there. Remember this, where he is in the White House and he's in front of the fireplace and he's got himself, he's got Nancy Pelosi, he's got Chuck Schumer, and I think it was Mike Pence was there as well. And Donald Trump was saying, I will shut down the government, and you know what? I'll absolutely own it. Because he was angry and frustrated because all we keep seeing is more spending and more spending and more spending. And people are upset. And so now here we are at the tail end of the Biden administration, thank the Lord. And here we are with yet another situation regarding the possibility of a shutdown government and how are we going to fund the government Do we need another continuing resolution? Are we going to be able to cut any spending and so on and so forth? It's the same thing every single time. And all the hand-wringing of the media, all the hand-wringing of politicians, especially Democrats, of course. While they did avert the government shutdown, finally passing a spending package that will continue to fund the government at current levels until mid-March. The legislation, here's what it's going to be. $110 billion. And by the way, it went from like 1,500 pages down to like, I think the final tally was like 116. The legislation will provide $110 billion in funding for natural disaster survivors, aid to farmers, as well as grant an extension to the Farm Bill, a multi-year law that provides farm loans and conservation programs to enhance water quality and combat soil erosion, among other things. And so the bill, final vote, I'm just seeing this now because I really have no interest in these stories just because it always ends the same way. But there were a lot of wrinkles to this one that I must admit were actually rather enjoyable to watch and to report on. But the final in the House, 366 to 34, most Republicans voted in favor, except for 34 who opposed it. All Democrats, of course, voted for it, except for one who voted present. Now, Rand Paul. Now, you all know I'm a big Rand Paul fan. Just so you know, I'm conservative, and Rand Paul has a lot of very conservative tendencies. And so, one of the things that I liked about Rand Paul is he is somebody who does not like to see these continuing resolutions over and over again. Now, a couple of the wrinkles that were involved in all this. Number one is that it's the tail end of Biden, and Donald Trump is due to take the oath of office on January 20th. And so Trump kind of surprised a lot of folks when he said he actually made the request to raise the debt ceiling. And people were scratching. I was scratching my head. I'm like, why in the world does incoming President Donald Trump want to see the debt ceiling raised? Well, because he knows that the debt ceiling will need to be raised. But see, the difference between Republicans and Democrats, and the difference between really conservative, fiscally conscious Republicans or conservatives and some of these other folks that aren't really all that concerned about our spending, is that you raise the debt limit to lower spending. In other words, Trump wanted some negotiating room. He wanted some room to be able to work whatever magic he has. So basically, and he also didn't want to have to do it because he feels like the last 4 years of fiscal train wreckery, if you will, of the Biden administration, that shouldn't have to result in Donald Trump in the first few months of his administration raising the debt limit. He thinks that's BS, and I actually agree. Trump's thinking is that the Biden administration helped get us into this god-awful mess over the last 4 years, so let him raise the debt ceiling so that it's not on me. But that didn't happen. And so now, just a couple of months into the incoming Donald Trump administration, they're going to have to figure out what to do with the debt limit. Now, Rand Paul, this is a guy who is not a big fan of raising the debt limit. He actually hates raising the debt limit. But he was on with Maria Bartiromo over the weekend. It was really interesting because he said, yeah, you know what? I would actually vote to raise the debt ceiling if it was a good means to an end. And I thought it was interesting because as a guy who's been a big fan of Rand Paul for a long time, this actually made a lot of sense.
I think we need to make sure the tax cuts become permanent is the most important. And also important is to make sure we cut spending. We have an annual deficit of $2 trillion, a total debt of $36 trillion. So we have to do something on the spending front, and we have to make the tax cuts permanent. That's a big job.
Yeah, those are big jobs. And congratulations to Donald Trump. You know that he's going to be able to get that through. But what about raising the debt ceiling?
On the debt ceiling, I'm one of the conservatives, who's never voted to raise the debt ceiling. But there are circumstances in which I would, and I've put those forward before. You know, I have a plan to balance the budget in 5 years. If we had a speaker with a spine who put forward a budget and a plan to cut spending over a 5-year period to balance the budget, I'll vote to raise the debt ceiling because you still have to add debt during that 5 years. What happens typically, and this is where President Trump is right, since conservatives don't vote for it, the liberals rule the day and they say, we'll vote for the debt ceiling, but only if you spend more and create more debt. So it backfires.
Yeah, so I like what Rand Paul is saying. And that is, okay, so if you come with a plan to ultimately cut the spending and actually try to, and we all know that there's never going to be a balanced budget again, but if you cut spending, if you make a deal with the American people, we are going to treat your money, your taxpayer dollars, with the respect that it deserves, and we're not going to waste it. Then yeah, let's vote to raise the debt ceiling if ultimately there is a plan to drop the spending. And that's what Rand Paul is saying. And so Trump, it makes sense. I don't want to get the blame for raising the debt ceiling 2 months into my administration because he knows how the game is played. He's going to get blamed for that. That's going to be a knock on his second administration, his second term in office. And he is absolutely right when he says Biden's the one that did all this. Look at all of the money that he's giving to, or he has given, for example, to Ukraine. And every time you turn around, Joe Biden is giving another $1 billion to some nation somewhere. Randomly, he gave $1 billion to Angola a couple of weeks ago. And it is infuriating. Because, of course, everywhere you go, whenever we have these conversations, you always end up at the same place, which is, what about America? What about our own borders? Talking about Ukraine. What about our own infrastructure? What about our own country? So I do like what Rand Paul says. So Trump's going to have to come in, and, you know, he's got the right idea because he's got Elon Musk, he's got Vivek Ramaswamy, and it's going to be all about the Department of Governmental Efficiency or Government Efficiency, whatever it is, DOGE. And so if you pass the debt ceiling, then yet get Ramaswamy and Elon Musk to give their recommendations, and we can actually lower that spending, then that ultimately will be a good thing. The other wrinkle that I really liked with this whole thing was, and people, you know, some of y'all might hate this, some of you might like it, but when Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, you know, they were out there talking about, this was when the 1,500-page version was going, the continuing resolution was about to pass, and Elon Musk, he posts on X, this bill cannot pass, and any Republican who votes for it should be primaried. I actually interviewed a congressman on my local show in Nashville, and I asked him, I said, how big of a difference did that make? And he said it made a huge difference. You see, because I think that part of what's going on now is that there's a lot of eyes on the Republican Party. There's a lot of eyes on these congressmen. And so now it's not just a quick 30-second story on the local network news. Well, they passed a continuing resolution. Oh, thank the Lord, wipe the sweat off the brow, take a deep breath. Thank God the government's not going to shut down. Next. But what is different now is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump are forcing the issue by forcing the American people to care about the debt ceiling, to understand the debt ceiling, to understand that every time we pass these continuing resolutions, and the Republicans and Democrats, when they vote to have more spending and more spending with each continuing resolution, then we're digging a hole that is getting deeper and deeper. And so I love that Elon Musk, because the mainstream media is not going to do it, right? I love that Elon Musk is doing whatever he can to hold these Republicans accountable. I think Rand Paul liked it as well. He even jokingly said on social media, maybe what we need is Elon Musk to be Speaker of the House.
But there's another alternative. Rather than getting rid of the debt ceiling, you get a speaker with a spine who puts forward a spending plan that actually encourages conservatives like myself and some members of the Freedom Caucus to join on, and we will support raising the debt ceiling, but only if you reform government. You have to reform government. This is probably the number one problem affecting the future of our country is this $36 trillion debt, and we have to do something about it. So for me, let's put forward something that cuts spending and then see if we can get all the conservatives on board where you don't need Democrat votes at all.
You know what's interesting? I was speaking to a fellow Republican. I consider myself a conservative, not necessarily Republican in nature, but whatever. It's a whole thing. But here's the thing, is that this guy's thing about Ukraine has always been, well, here's the problem with Ukraine. I say this too. Here's the problem with Ukraine is that we're giving them all of this money, but there's no real plan to stop this war. It's just a blank check. And this particular guy was for the original continuing resolution. The one for 15, the one that was 1,500 pages. And I said, well, wait a minute. Here's what I don't understand is you have these Republicans who will say just what you said and what I've said, which is we give all this money to Ukraine, but there's no actual plan to end the war. Well, the same thing applies to our congressional spending and the budgets. And that is that we keep passing these continuing resolutions. We keep passing the continuing resolutions, and we keep raising the spending levels and raising the debt ceiling. But what we don't have is a plan to stop it. So you can't, on the one hand, say, man, it really pisses me off that we don't have any way to end the war in Ukraine, but it's a blank check. We just keep giving them money with no plan to end it. Well, it's the same thing with government spending. It's a blank check. Raise the levels of spending, raise the debt ceiling with absolutely no way to fix the problem. The same concept applies. Now, Rand Paul was asked, the Kentucky senator, he was asked, okay, so what about that tweet that you sent out? Were you kidding about having Elon Musk as Speaker of the House?
I think you need strength in a speaker, somebody who can put forward something that actually is going to change the course. I can tell you, if we add $8 trillion in this next administration of debt, people will be frustrated. We have to do a better job on spending, and that means fiscal conservatives like myself and others will continue to stand up on principle because we're afraid we're going to destroy the country. We're afraid they're going to destroy the currency. We're afraid that we're getting to a cataclysmic point. Social Security's running out of money. Medicare's running out of money. Somebody has to stand up and say, enough's enough. We don't have any more money.
And he's absolutely right. And so that's what Donald Trump is going to be tasked with when he comes into office. And by the way, you know what's coming up? I think it's today. Is Rand Paul's Festivus report is going to come out documenting all of the absolute waste that our government partakes in. We're going to talk a little bit about that straight ahead. Plus your calls, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-90-RED-EYE. Dan Mandison for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. Follow me on X and Facebook at Dan Mandis Show. I think Donald Trump, he said a lot of things over the past, year or so, past couple of years. He's been running for president again, and he won the election. And he's made a lot of promises. I love this headline real quick, and then I'm going to get to the final Rand Paul soundbite. But this is an interesting headline. Trump's mass deportation plan plunged into crisis by ultra-conservative Republican rebels. And they're talking about the likes of Chip Roy and Nancy Mace and Thomas Massie and others who are balking at all of this spending. Now, Trump has said, and others have said, that it doesn't matter how much the mass deportation costs. We got to get it done. Well, the question is, when Trump comes into office, some are saying it's going to cost $88 billion to deport 1 million migrants. Now, that sounds insane to me, but whatever. And so if you're a Republican and you know that Donald Trump, one of the big things that he talked about was deporting millions of illegal aliens, do you dare not vote for a budget that includes that $88 billion? Because that would mean that there is going to be a raising of the budget and a raising of the debt ceiling. And there perhaps won't be any cuts to the spending, only more money to pay for all of the illegal aliens getting deported. You see how this is going to play out. This is going to be ugly. And we're not like the Democrats, friends. I mean, conservatives and Republicans, they are free thinkers. And they are willing to say, you know what? I'm not going to vote for this. And the reason I'm not going to vote to deport millions of illegal aliens is because it'll cost $88 billion at least. And they're not willing to spend that money or raise the debt ceiling. This is going to be a buzzsaw, folks.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. Merry Christmas to all of you. You can follow me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show, mainly on X and Facebook. That would be awesome. So Rand Paul, of course, you know, Kentucky senator, and he is every year putting out the Festivus report. And I guess apparently the Festivus report is going to come out at some point today. And he was on with Maria Bartiromo. I was playing some audio earlier. And he's talking about, number one, what's going to be in the report. And number two, when you folks and I can guarantee you that tomorrow night I'll have some highlights from the report. But he spoke a little bit about government waste with Maria Bartiromo.
For example, $760 million spent at the NIH on diversity, equity, inclusion. I thought they were studying science over there. Nope, it's about race. That's crazy. $600,000 to discuss why there are microaggressions among obese Latinx. What does that even mean? Even Latin American people think Latinx is a stupid term. These are people who can't figure out their gender, Latinx, who are fat, who are having microaggressions against each other. This is the insanity. This is why we can't rest until we cut spending, and we can't just raise the debt ceiling without actually cutting spending.
I mean, listen, I agree with Rand Paul. Here's the problem, though. What's going to happen? I was talking about this a little bit earlier. Here's what's going to happen. I mean, I can see this coming a mile away. So we've got two opposing contradictory viewpoints, right? So we want to deport all of these illegal aliens. I mean, we've got millions and millions of illegal aliens in this country. We got a lot of bad ones. We got a lot of violent ones and so forth. So we have that to contend with. Some estimates, in order to deport 1 million, we got to spend like $88 billion, which seems insane to me, but whatever. Like, I don't know why it costs so much, but I'm sure somebody can explain that to me. But here's the problem. Is it on the one hand, like if you're somebody like me, right, there's two contradictory things at play. I don't like to see these constant continuing resolutions where we raise the debt ceiling and add more spending. I want to see spending cut. But on the other hand, we got to come up with the $88 billion to start getting rid of all of these illegal aliens. And so if you are somebody who is a very much of a conservative, a fiscal conservative, and you don't want to see any more spending, you want to see spending cut, but you also want all of these illegal aliens deported. And it's going to cost a lot of money. So what would your priority then be? Would your priority be to cut the deficit and the debt and the spending? Because if you're going to do that, then that puts the other priority, which is deportation, in peril. But here's the thing, is that we spend, as a country, we spend so much money that there's probably a 1,000 different places that you could cut to find that $88 billion that it would cost to deport 1 million people. And I don't think that it's going to cost that much, but whatever. Let's just go with it. There's a lot of places you can cut. I mean, everybody knows that. If we focused on just the essentials, and to me, the essentials, we need clearly these days, we need a strong military. We need strong borders. And here's the thing, and we need to prevent crime. Here's the thing that we have to contend with, is that the Biden administration and the Democrats, the reason why they had wide open borders was because they knew that we wouldn't have the money to deport all these people. And then Trump comes in and he says, like hell, hold my beer. He doesn't drink, but you know what I'm talking about. So now the big question is, how will Donald Trump be able to do this? How will he be able to balance getting rid of all of these, deporting all of these illegal aliens, yet at the same time lowering spending and coming up with a plan to cut the deficit and cutting spending? Because let's be honest, friends, those are two extremely contradictory viewpoints or terms. So we'll have to see what happens. But that's what I mean when I say the Republican Party, you have all of these people, all of these Republicans that are saying, and you just heard Rand Paul, he was eviscerating House Speaker Mike Johnson. And the reason why he's eviscerating Johnson, a lot of Republicans did. They were really, really angry with Mike Johnson. And the reason why they were angry with Mike Johnson is because he felt like he put them in the position that they were in, which was having to vote for or be put in this position where they would have to vote for a 1,500-page continuing resolution.
It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. I think that it's shameful that people that celebrate Doge coming in, and yet we're going to vote for another $1 billion to be added to the deficit. And so it's ironic.
It's opposite of what the Doge Commission is trying to do. So am I voting for it? No, I'm not.
We're just fundamentally unserious about spending. And as long as you got a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free.
Yeah. That last guy that was speaking was Chip Roy, a congressman out of the state of Texas. And he's right. And so now you have all of these Republicans who are really angry at House Speaker Mike Johnson. Anna Paulina Luna.
The fact is that, look, this is a sandwich. I don't know how else to say that. We're being forced into this position. They could have done a standalone. They did this because they knew that it would put members in this position to support it. We're damned if we do. We're damned if we don't.
Yeah. And so, as all of this was going on, you had Elon Musk very active on social media. Bill Hagerty, Senator Bill Hagerty, who is here in the state of Tennessee. I'm a talk show host in Nashville, Tennessee. And he was on with Dana Bash over the weekend because there's a lot of talk, and I think it's ridiculous talk, but there's a lot of talk about who really is the leader of the Republican Party. Because Elon Musk, he got everybody's attention when he posted that Republicans who vote for the initial bill, they should be primaried.
Musk posted that anyone who votes yes should lose their office in 2 years, and lawmakers are scrambling.
Tweets from Musk, has that complicated this?
Well, I think that there's always a lot of interest in what's happening up here, and
this is more than interest. They're telling people if they vote yes, they should be voted out.
The social media world is a part of our politics, and I think members have to expect that. There will be a lot of hard votes in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that's John Thune. So Bill Hagerty was on with Dana Bash, I think this was Sunday, and she was asking him about the role that Elon Musk plays. Because, again, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Elon is actually going to be the president. Who's really going to be running the country, they say?
He allowed for transparency when he put on social media. He actually did it at 4:15 a.m. on Wednesday. And what he specifically posted was, quote, "This bill should not pass." And then, Senator, he posted 75 times over the course of that day, attacking the bill, pressuring Republicans to tank it. Donald Trump didn't weigh in publicly for more than 12 hours and only did so after it was clear Republicans were following Elon Musk's lead and turning on the bill. So did Donald Trump only pick this fight because Elon Musk backed him into a corner?
I mean, what a dumb question by Dana Bash. Because Donald Trump, he has tried. I know that he spent a lot of money in that first term, even before COVID, and I get that. But Donald Trump understands that he was sent to Washington, D.C. to try to stop all of this crazed spending. This is what Senator Hagerty had to say.
I certainly wouldn't say that, and I say thank God Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Yep.
Because that's the only way we would even know what's in this bill. Otherwise, the conspiracy between the government and Twitter would have continued, and this would have all been covered up. But the fact is that Elon Musk exposing this meant that every one of our offices was inundated with calls from our constituents. The American public wanted to see this change.
He's absolutely right. Elon Musk and Twitter is forcing Americans to care. It's putting a good light on what these politicians have been doing all this time. And so when you have the sunlight on this bill or this legislation, the continuing resolution as it was last week, it got people's attention. And that is so incredibly important because people do need to know what's going on. And Bill Hagerty, the senator, he is absolutely right. Elon Musk is the one that bought Twitter, or X, named it X, and now he's forcing the conversation. And that's what we need to have, is a conversation about this crazed, never-ending spending.
Donald Trump was speaking on behalf of the American public. Again, he's just the president-elect. The current president is AWOL, but Donald Trump stepped up and said, look, this is what needs to happen. And I think all of my constituents were there, or the calls at least that I got in my office. Elon Musk's transparency helped make that happen.
Well, I think as a senator voting, I presume that you do your best to read the bills that you're voting on. I understand it was quite large at the beginning, but
memo to Dana Bash, in case you're listening out there in Washington, D.C. or New York or wherever you are. I think that the senator was actually talking about the American people and about how the American people would be able to find out what was in the bill. Because let's face it, very few of us have massive amounts of staff who can spend all their time reading through a piece of legislation. So, yeah, memo to Dana Bash. Haggerty was referring to the American people who have a right to know what their representatives are up to.
To say that it was only Elon Musk that made people aware of what was in it, that can't be true.
No, I'm not saying it was only Elon Musk. We're all struggling to read it, to digest an over 1,500-page bill that we were literally given just hours to comb through. I was working through it. My staff didn't sleep the night before. It's extraordinarily frustrating. But I think the added weight of the American public understanding and the simple picture that Elon Musk put forward showing the size of the stack of what we originally presented. We started out with over 1,500 pages. We got it down to 120 pages. Still, it's not what I would have liked to have seen in terms of a final work product, but it gets the president's cabinet back in place. Yep. It certainly gets much needed aid to the people of East Tennessee who've suffered dramatically from the floods. That should have taken place earlier, but unfortunately it got attached to this tool. We needed to get this passed. We need to get President Trump's team in place and in office. And at the end of the day, we had a better product than we started with. And I appreciate that. And Elon Musk's role in that was significant.
So just to put a button on that, I'm sure you've seen and heard Democrats are mockingly suggesting that Elon Musk is the one calling the shots. He questioning who the president-elect really is, to the point where Donald Trump's press secretary issued a statement on Thursday saying, quote, President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, full stop. Sure, that's not the kind of statement that he and his team really would have liked to have put out there. But do you think that was necessary?
Dana Bash. So, a couple of things. Number one, does anybody else find it ironic that the Democrats are questioning who really will be the president in 2025 moving forward? When we've had the last 4 years where Joe Biden has been the assumed and presumed president of the United States, but the reality is that he was not the one calling the shots. There are all these puppeteers, and Joe Biden is at the end of the string because his mind is slowly dissolving into the abyss, and there's insiders within the Democrat Party who were actually running the country. I mean, how dare they? How dare they say what they say about Elon Musk actually being the president heading into 2025 as opposed to Donald Trump, when you look and see what the Wall Street Journal reported related to Joe Biden? Unbelievable. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Eight 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. They return after the new year. Appreciate you listening. You can find out more about me on the Dan Mandis Show Facebook page. You can also follow me on X at Dan Mandis Show. There's a lot of news yet to come, including a GOP congresswoman who hasn't voted in 6 months. Have you heard this story? It is insanity, and it's coming up next.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis indeed, in for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning. I've got a bit of a dilemma, just very quickly. Take a little off ramp from the news for just 1 second. I've got a personal dilemma. If you follow me on Facebook, you know that over the weekend, my family, my 11-year-old and my wife and myself, we were baking cookies, for Santa. Here's my problem. I used to work overnights, and I remembered why I was glad that I stopped, because for whatever reason, when I work overnights, I get hungry and I get the munchies. And so in the several hours that I've already been on the air here on Red Eye Radio, I'm going to be, and Santa will be lucky if there's any cookies left, because I've already chowed down 2. And I think part of it is because I need the sugar, because I'm not used to working overnights. And so there's a very strong possibility that by the time Christmas Eve rolls around, there's not going to be any more cookies left for Santa. And I'm going to start looking like Santa, if you know what I mean. There is a video, and I don't know if it was the right thing to repost this or not. But earlier in the program, I was telling you about this story of this illegal alien, this migrant in New York, who set this woman on fire. And it's on video. And it's horrifying. And it's horrifying for a number of different reasons. I did go ahead and I did repost it. But it's a bizarre video. Now, if you don't know the story, the story is that a migrant, I think he's from Guatemala, he literally set a woman on fire in the New York subway. She's standing right there in the doorway. And she's just, when the video picks up, she's literally like standing there and she's on fire. And there's all these police officers that are around. And listen, I'm a big supporter of the cops. I just don't understand it. She's standing in the doorway on fire. And the Guatemalan that set her on fire is using his jacket to sort of fan the flames as she's standing there in the doorway of the subway. And there's all these people. This is what I don't know the intricacies of trying to save a person who's on fire. So I just want to get that out of the way. So maybe what I'm about to say is just dumb. Wouldn't be the first time I've said something dumb. I've been on radio for a long time. But there's all these cops that are like walking around. And people, it's December in New York. People are wearing jackets. Nobody takes their jacket off and would put it around her to try to smother the flames. Nobody does that. Not one person does that. Got a lot of people that are filming it with their cell phones. Cops are walking around in heavy jackets, but nobody puts a jacket over her. Like her shoulders are on fire. And she's just, it's bizarre. And she's standing there like you would, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it other than if you want to see it, it's you can follow me on X at Dan Mandis Show if you want to see it. But it is horrifying for a number of different reasons. Number one is the New York mayor, I should say the governor for the fine state of New York, Kathy Hochul, she actually just, I kid you not, friends, she just put out a video talking about how safe the subway system is in New York.
I'm on the subway train heading out to Queens Center. I have a lot of, not quite last minute, but I have holiday shopping to do. I've got an adorable 2-year-old granddaughter, so it's a lot more fun to shop. I can take the subway wherever we need to go. And I want all New Yorkers to feel safe, which is why we've added so many more National Guard, over 250 more people that'll make sure that your ride is as safe as it can be.
Yeah, and just days later, when that video was put out by Kathy Hochul, woman is set on fire. A migrant from Guatemala was arrested in connection to the heinous death of a woman who was lit on fire and burned to death on a subway train in Brooklyn, New York on Sunday. Sources identify the person of interest to Fox News as 33-year-old Sebastian Zepeda. While police did not identify the person of interest, A high-level New York PD source telling Fox News Digital the individual entered the U.S. illegally from Guatemala in 2018. And be sure to point this out, when President-elect Trump was president during his first term. The person of interest has no prior arrests in New York City and one prior arrest in Arizona, the source said, though details about the arrests has not been made available. So a horrifying scene in New York. And it's clear that things are not going well in this sanctuary city. And by the way, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, aha, he came in during Donald Trump's presidency. This is on Donald Trump. No. Because, like it or not, Trump did everything he could to try to stop illegal immigration. The Biden administration literally opened the doors, put out the welcome mat, and said, come on in. What Biden did, or those people that are handling the Biden administration, that was absolutely unforgivable. What Biden did. Trump, at the very least, was trying to protect the border. And that's why, we just had this Turning Point USA America Fest. And you may have heard me. I played some audio earlier from President-elect Donald Trump. And he had a great speech. But I'm going to be honest with you. For me, I was actually more impressed with incoming border czar Tom Homan.
Out of the gate, day one, we're going to focus on public safety threats and national security threats. They're first. They're coming first. And Tren de Agua, your days are numbered. My gang's bigger than your gang. And we're going to take you out of the country. We're going to port you out of here. Who do you think you are, coming to the greatest nation on earth and victimizing Americans in this country? Your days are numbered. You're number one on the list.
Yeah, and I think, and I've said this on my local show in Nashville, Tennessee, the reason why people like to listen to Tom Homan is because we have been listening for the last 4 years to Alejandro Mayorkas. And let's all just be honest. Alejandro Mayorkas is a dolt. And he is somebody who has been lying to the American people for 4 years. And he kept talking about, there's a really interesting interview. I enjoyed the interview with Margaret Brennan and Alejandro Mayorkas. And listen, if you're somebody who hates Alejandro Mayorkas as passionately as I do, well, there's a lot of things to listen to fuel that hate. Because he continues to try to say that they did all they could to protect the southern border. And my bottom line is that you, Biden administration, you invited the chaos by opening up the border. That's what you did. And so Brennan asked him about the sheer numbers of people that came across our southern border during the Biden administration.
So at this point last year, in December of last year, border crossings were at record highs. Now they've dropped to the lowest level of the Biden administration. How much of that drop off is because Mexico is now stopping migrants from even getting to that southern border of the United States?
That is critically one element of it. It is not the only element of it. The president took decisive action.
He really didn't.
After politics killed what would have been an extraordinarily enduring solution to what.
You know what's funny? Biden did take, decisive executive action on literally day one when he executive ordered all of Donald Trump's border protocols into oblivion. That's when Joe Biden made decisive action, when he opened up the border and then lied about it for 3 years.
What is a broken immigration system, that bipartisan legislation that I was very proud to be a part of, would have really delivered a solution. Because politics killed it, the president took executive action. In June of this year, we began to execute very successfully and very rapidly that executive action, and that has been a key driver of the low number of encounters.
Right. So a few things, and we mentioned this earlier in the broadcast. But when they talk about the lowest numbers of encounters, that's fine, except that also means that they might be sneaking through other points, and there's a lot of the border that is still unprotected, obviously. And so they're coming in other ways, perhaps. Biden also, this is part of the news in the last couple of weeks, Biden is apparently finally deporting people. That's great, but he could have been doing and should have been doing this for the last 4 years. Instead of letting in all of these people. It's like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden has deported 200,000 people. Well, that's all fine, well and good, but he let in millions. So don't sit here and tell me about a couple 100,000 that he's deported when there's a whole bunch of folks here that we don't know where they are. And so I love that Mayorkas, compare the tough talk of Tom Homan, incoming border czar, to Alejandro Mayorkas. And let's all be honest. The reason, we talked about this at the time, the reason why Joe Biden wanted to get that executive order going was because he knew that he was losing the election on illegal immigration. I mean, that is exactly what happened. The open border, Mayorkas, one of the things that he said was, well, it's not just America that's having a problem with illegal immigration. This is a dynamic. This has been happening all across the world.
We are now delivering to the incoming administration a southern border at which the number of individuals encountered is well below the level experienced in 2019, the last year before the pandemic.
But the immigration surge into the U.S. since 2021 has been the largest in American history.
Mm-hmm.
That is incredible.
Oh, and
so,
it is, Margaret, it is one element of the greatest displacement of people in the world since World War II. This is a phenomenon that has not been unique to the southern border of the United States.
Right.
But here's the thing, is that the open border helped fuel that migration into America. You see, I would say to Alejandro Mayorkas, just because it's happening across the world doesn't mean that it has to happen here. Had you kept with the Trump protocols and you'd not done what you did, a lot of people would still be alive today, as a matter of fact. We had people from all across the world coming to Mexico and coming across our southern border because they knew that they could get in. So that's hardly a defense. And even if it is true that migration, again, was going on all across the world, doesn't excuse the fact that he and Biden left the border open and lied about it.
All that time passed. Why wait until 5 months before the U.S. election to put in place those asylum restrictions that did cut off the flow?
Margaret, remember
that ended a crisis.
Margaret, remember where we were when the president took office. We were in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The prior administration had imposed Title 42, which is a public health authority, and enabled us to expel individuals, to continue to expel individuals at the border as the prior administration had done.
I'm not exactly sure where he was going with all of that, but he doesn't even mention the fact, and nor does Margaret Brennan, they don't mention the fact that Mayorkas ended the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden ended the Remain in Mexico policy, stopped all deportations, remember that moratorium, stopped wall construction, and eventually just ended up implementing a massive catch and release program. And so it's so frustrating because they lied to us for the better part of 4 years, telling us the border was closed when it was obvious that it was open. And so when I say that the American people love hearing Tom Homan speak, it's because we've been hearing Alejandro Mayorkas for the last 4 years. And so I think that Homan is kind of like a palate cleanser, really.
People always ask me why I take this so seriously, and people say Tom Homan's a racist, Tom Homan's a national. Say whatever you want. Why do I care? I care because I stood in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens that suffocated and baked to death, including a 5-year-old little boy that died in his father's arms. Throughout my career, I've seen tragedies, held dying children. I've seen dead aliens on the trail. I've talked to little girls as young as 9 years old that were raped multiple times by criminal cartels. They're animals. When you look into a little girl's eyes, 9 years old, and who had adults take everything innocent and pure from her, you look in those eyes, and those eyes have no life in them. Her life will never be the same. That's what pisses me off, because President Trump had us locked down. He had it locked down. And this administration came in and unlocked it. People die on the border every day. Women are sex trafficked in this country every day.
He's absolutely right. More people need to get angry like Tom Homan, because we do need change in this country. That's what Donald Trump is going to try to do with the help of Tom Homan. Dan Mandis here, 866-90 Red Eye. We'll return next.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on roadside inspections. At a roadside inspection, inspectors may ask to see supporting documents. A supporting document is a document generated or received by a motor carrier in the normal course of business that can be used by law enforcement to verify a driver's logs. These documents can include bills of lading, itineraries, schedules, or equivalent documents that indicate the origin and destination of each trip. They can also include dispatch or trip records, expense receipts related to on-duty/not driving periods, including receipts for meals, lodging, and fuel, electronic mobile communication transmitted through a fleet management system, and payroll records, settlement sheets, or equivalent documents that indicate payment to a driver. Drivers using paper logs must also keep toll receipts. Supporting documents must contain the driver's name, carrier-assigned identification number or vehicle unit number that can be linked to the driver, the date, the name of the nearest city, town, or village, and the time. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. By the way, speaking of illegal immigration, did you see this? You can find this on my page on X at Dan Mandis Show. Ruthless migrant thugs are entering the U.S. legally through Biden-approved loophole app. This is the CBP One app. And we've all been telling you about, the talk radio has been talking about this a lot, these Venezuelans coming into our country and terrorizing people, including taking over that apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, Tren de Aragua. And so it looks like they're coming in a couple of different ways. One, illegally, and another way through the Biden-approved CBP One app, which is indeed full of loopholes and clearly no vetting. Unbelievable.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, and that is where Greg is calling from Chicago. Greg, I apologize for keeping you on hold. Go ahead, man. Thanks for holding on.
Hey, how you doing? I'd wait for you forever, Dan.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Go ahead.
I would just say this. I didn't hear the argument where conservatives, or whatever you want to label them, said that spending billion? I don't know. Yeah. What is it? I can't even keep the number straight.
Right. They said it's $88 billion to deport 1 million, which I don't get the math. But the math doesn't seem to work. But whatever.
I don't get the math either. But you know what? what cost do you put on the fact that you're a nation of law and order? If you don't have law and order, if your country's not based on a solid foundation of God, family, and country, what do you have? You're going to save a few dollars here and there. And I know I'm being very flippant when I say that, a few dollars, right? Let's assume their number is correct. Why can't you take some of this money and cut some spending from some departments that I'm sure you can get some fat from? No doubt about it. But you are going to have to spend some money to solve a problem that in the long run looks like it may save you some money. And think about what it saves in terms of the health of the nation. Like you illustrated, not all of the migrants that came here are bad people. And I get it. They came here for economic reasons. But that's not a reason to seek asylum. That's just not. What you can do, and you got to remember, the process is the punishment. This administration has a very short leash, 2 years until the midterms. They have a lot to tackle. They have to tackle law and order on the border. They have to tackle law and order in the health industry and the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry, in the white-collar crime area, all of this. There's lawfare they have to destroy, all of it. There's a lot of damage done by this past administration. And please, let's not forget that every time you play Mayorkas, bookend it with what he and how he felt when they first came in about rescinding those laws that Donald Trump had on the books. He was gleeful.
Oh, they remember? Yeah. I remember, Greg. I remember he said, there's too many to mention. You're right. I remember that quote. I'll see if I can find it. But, hey, Greg, I got to ask this question. So you're in Chicago. You got to be excited that Mayorkas, I should say, Tom Homan, has decided that Chicago will be first when it comes to cracking down on illegal immigration and getting the bad guys out.
Well, here's what I would say. I would say that I'm in the suburbs of Chicago, and I'm going to leave Illinois. It's a complete it's devastated by the bad policies and the crime and the law and just lawlessness. And you point me to one large city in America that doesn't suffer from the same fate. I didn't even know about that New York story that you told me. That's sickening. That's sickening. That should never happen in a civilized society. And where is our law and order? Where is our justice? Where is our faith? Where is our love for country? It's all been flushed down the toilet this last administration. One thing I want to leave you with, Dan, is think about this. Think about all the behavior about that CEO that was murdered, or think about the protests on some of these college campuses. I would say that there's a big problem in this country, and it's a lot deeper than just looking at the overall surface of the problem and saying, hey, this person has this problem, that person has that problem. There's a deep, deep river of discontent running in this country, and we've got to get it back. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a real long time. But
let me ask you,
take that first step.
You're right, Greg. Hey, Greg, let me totally agree. Greg, real quick, you said you're going to leave Illinois. Where do you think you want to go?
I still like the Great Lakes because of the Great Lakes. Indiana, I love Tennessee, but it's very expensive. Maybe Southern Ohio. I don't know. Dan. Just look at Illinois. Look at who's running every single lever of power in this state. Look specifically at the Chicagoland area, Cook County. It's in complete shambles. There's nothing left. All you have is the architecture of Chicago. That's it. The soul's been ripped out.
Boy, you're right. And, Greg, I very much appreciate the call. I used to live in Indiana. Greg, I'm here to tell you, Indiana is awesome. And I will tell you, Nashville and Tennessee is very expensive, but it is also very worth it. But you could not pay me enough money to live in Chicago. There is no way. So if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, and you were horrified at the thought of Dianne Feinstein and how just she was, I mean, respectfully so. I don't know. Let's just say that she was dementia-ridden. And in her waning days, in her final days in the Senate. And you were one of those that were like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe Dianne Feinstein. She's been in there forever, term limits, blah, 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 right? Well, then you've got to be horrified at your own party, friends, if you're a Republican. Missing GOP Congresswoman Kay Granger has been found living in Texas assisted living facility for dementia patients. She has not voted in 6 months. She's 81 years old. And nobody knew where she was. And nobody within the Republican Party was like, where the hell is Kay? You know what I mean? How does this, that's what everybody's, how does this happen? Now, I realize that that a lot of us believe that, our Congress people are brain dead anyway. But for Kay Granger, I mean, she was nowhere to be found. And she was able to get away with it. When I say she, I guess I would mean the people around her, too. And the Republican Party. And I don't pretend to know the inner workings of the House of Representatives. But, oh, my gosh, how does somebody not vote for 6 months? And nobody notices? And nobody, goes up to her office and maybe knocks on the door and says, hey, where's Kay? Was she going to, vote on some of these really important pieces of legislation that are going on right now? Did she maybe want to vote for this? And so she'd been missing. And apparently, a reporter for a local news outlet started to do some research by contacting her offices, and no one responded. All of it went directly to voicemail. They finally figured out that she has been living in a $4,000 a month nursing home for the past 6 months for dementia patients. Granger's constituency office was also a complete ghost town upon a visit there, with no signs of anyone working there. Eventually, one of Granger's constituents suggested to the Dallas Express that the Congresswoman was living in an assisted facility. She was reportedly living at a care home that specialized in memory loss after she had been found wandering, lost, and confused in her district. A visit to the Tradition Clearfolk in Fort Worth resulted in 2 employees confirming that Granger lives there. I mean, this is sad. And I'm not making light of her dementia. I am aghast at the fact that this went on for so long, where she wasn't voting. With a month remaining in her term and important votes still taking place in Washington daily, local officials are furious to discover her absence. Here's the other thing, and I'll chalk this up to a lack of local reporting, but how is it possible that local media didn't pick up that she had been gone for 6 months? You know what I mean? How did that happen? With a month remaining in her term and important votes still taking place in Washington daily, local officials are furious to discover her absence. They say the lack of representation for CD12 is troubling to say the least, says Tarrant County GOP Chair Beau French. At a time when extraordinarily important votes are happening, including debt ceiling, disaster relief, farm bills, and border issues, Kay Granger is nowhere to be found. I mean, I will say that there's a couple of different stories woven, into this. Number one, where was Mike Johnson and the Republican Party? They had to have known. They had to have known this was going on. So that's number one. Number two, a lack of local reporting. Because how is it that a member of Congress can be gone for 6 months and nobody notices? Nobody reports on it? They say the fact that Kay Granger is unable to leave her nursing home to participate in the most important congressional vote of the year suggests she was already in visible decline when she ran for re-election in 2022. A sad and humiliating way to end her political career, they say. Sad that nobody cared enough to take away the keys before she reached this moment, and a sad commentary on the situation. The Congresswoman and her staff presumably continue to take in their taxpayer-funded salaries. Unbelievable. And yet Republicans, and I'm one of them, I'm aghast by this. I'm aghast by the whole story about Joe Biden that broke last week from the Wall Street Journal, as they were saying that that Biden has been in rapid decline since he took office. And it's been a big old cover-up. Well, so is this. Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm reading this, and yeah, it's really sad. It is. I don't even know what else to say about it, except it's really sad. And just so we're clear, and I know a lot of you folks are going to disagree with me, because I know that people are screaming at the radio right now. What about term limits? What about term limits? Well, here's the deal. In the House of Representatives, term limits every 2 years. In the Senate, every 6 years. In the White House, every 4 years, right? So, I mean, to me, term limits are the voters. Now, the very easy, and the votes. Now, the very easy rebuttal to that is that, let's face it, let's be honest. People are dumb. I mean, look at San Francisco. How long has Nancy Pelosi been in power? And clearly she's not well. Nancy Pelosi. She fell down the steps and I forget where she was, but she fell down the steps. Hope she's going to be okay. She had to get hip surgery and the whole thing. But, I mean, you got these people that just, they stay in power forever. And I don't know, at some point, maybe there's got to be some sort of well, you don't want to do it that way. You don't want to say there's got to be, some sort of an organization within Washington, D.C. that looks at these folks and says, you know what? No, you're not. You're no longer fit to serve. Because you don't want to open up that can of worms, because that can be politicized really easily. So I don't know what the answer to this is. I mean, the reality is that in cities all across America, whether Republican or Democrat, in districts all across America, you do have people that will just vote for the name. Oh, Kay Granger, yeah, we love Kay. She's been here forever. And sadly, part of this is the fact that there's not a lot of people that want to run for office anymore, because your entire reputation ends up in tatters. And if you ever did anything when you were in high school, when you were in college, you looked at the wrong website, you said the wrong thing, you tweeted the wrong thing, then your life is in ruins. And so that's how people like Kay Granger end up being in office forever. And nobody, some of these districts, I even wonder if people run against them in a primary. Because nobody wants to run for office anymore because they destroy your reputation. So if you're horrified about Joe Biden, if you were horrified at Dianne Feinstein, you've got to be horrified about Kay Granger. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. So this story of Kay Granger, Aaron sent me some audio. I don't have time to play it now, but people on the socials are saying that this claim that no one knew about Kay Granger's dementia, they're saying is laughable, because there's speeches where she was just stumbling and bumbling all over the place. And so for a lot of folks out there that are criticizing the Republicans and how they handled this, the question is, and I said the same thing about Joe Biden, who knew what when? A lot of questions on this. Got a lot more straight ahead. It's Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.